It didn't feel like the day my life would fall apart. There was no eerie stillness, no goosebumps, no sixth sense telling me to run. Just a regular Thursday morning, the kind where the biggest decision is whether to pour oat milk or whole into your coffee. Max, my Shih Tzu, was doing his usual routine of chasing sunbeams across the living room floor, slipping on the hardwood, then staring at me like I owed him an explanation. I was barefoot in the same gray sweatpants I'd worn for 3 days, hair up in a bun that had collapsed somewhere between bed and breakfast. My phone buzzed with a new email from the scholarship office, which I ignored. I had plans that morning: clean my room, call Grandpa, and maybe, just maybe, paint over the water stain in the hallway ceiling. I was halfway through folding laundry when I heard the knock. 2 sharp taps, deliberate, too steady to be a neighbor, too firm to be a delivery. Max stopped mid-paw, his ears perked. I wiped my hands on my sweatshirt and walked to the door, peering through the peephole with a sinking feeling I couldn't name yet. 2 uniformed officers, one tall and wiry, the other solidly built with a posture like he'd been born suspicious of everyone. I hesitated. I opened the door slowly. "Can I help you?" The tall one stepped forward. "Rachel Miller?" "Yes." He didn't smile. "We've received a tip regarding illegal substances at this address. We'd like to ask you a few questions." My brain short-circuited for a second. Illegal substances. Wait, what? I laughed. Not a nervous laugh, but an incredulous one. This has to be a mistake. Behind them, the neighborhood looked completely normal. Mr. Jensen was watering his hydrangeas. A sprinkler ticked across a lawn. A bird chirped from the tree near our mailbox. "May we come in?" the broader officer asked. "We won't take much of your time." I stepped back because, why wouldn't I? I wasn't hiding anything. I hadn't even gotten a parking ticket. I glanced toward the kitchen, half expecting my mom to appear with her usual "we have guests" look on her face. Instead, she was already in the hallway. "Oh, officers," she said, as if she'd been expecting them. Her voice was calm. Her hair, as always, was pinned perfectly behind her ears. In her hands, a steaming mug of chamomile tea. She smiled. "Rachel's room is the last one on the left," she said, taking a delicate sip. I told them everything. Everything. My heart jolted. What do you mean? Why would they go to my room?" Then my dad appeared, leaning awkwardly against the doorframe, arms crossed, expression blank. And then I saw her. Vanessa at the top of the stairs, hoodie sleeves pulled over her hands, her expression unreadable. There was something in her stillness that made my skin crawl. She didn't say a word, didn't move, just stared. The officers didn't waste time. They moved past me like they already knew the layout, like they'd been briefed. "Excuse me," I said, louder now, following after them. "What is going on?" One of them was already in my room. Max barked once, confused, then looked at me, tail stiff. The shorter officer knelt beside my dresser. He didn't even hesitate. He reached down, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a clear plastic bag, full of white pills. The world tilted. For a second, I thought I'd pass out, or scream, or both. Instead, I let out a short, stunned laugh. "That's not mine. That's not. I've never seen that before in my life." They didn't react. The taller officer turned toward the hallway. "Sir, ma'am, can you confirm what you told us earlier, that you've seen your daughter in possession of this item?" I whipped around to face them. "Tell them, you know that's not mine." My mom folded her hands. "She's been distant lately." "Withdrawn," my father added, his eyes still not meeting mine. "We thought it was school stress at first." "Are you kidding me?" I whispered. Vanessa was still at the top of the stairs, arms folded, smirk gone. She looked bored. "Rachel Miller," the officer said, stepping toward me. "You're under arrest for possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute." I stumbled backward. "You can't just. You don't understand." The handcuffs snapped around my wrists. Max let out a low, helpless whine. My parents didn't protest, didn't cry, didn't demand they stop. They stood there, quiet, still, almost relieved. Vanessa turned her face away, like the scene bored her. As they led me toward the front door, I looked back one last time, and I understood something I hadn't before. They weren't shocked, they weren't heartbroken. They were waiting for this. They didn't even let me grab a jacket. I was marched out of my house barefoot, handcuffed, humiliated. The cold metal pressed against my skin like it belonged there. My hair clung to my cheeks from sweat and panic. I remember the click of the car door. The way the officer guided my head gently like that made it better. I sat in the back of the patrol car, silent. The seat was hard plastic. The window was smudged with fingerprints. I watched as the house I had grown up in, my home, shrunk in the side mirror. It didn't look like a crime scene. It looked like betrayal. The holding cell was the color of sadness. Gray walls, gray floor, gray light. Even the buzz of the fluorescent bulbs felt distant, like it was coming from inside my own skull. I sat on a concrete bench bolted to the wall. No pillow, no blanket, just cold and silence. Time didn't pass in minutes there. It passed in moments of disbelief. Moments like realizing my parents never even tried to stop it. Remembering the way Vanessa looked at me like she had already won. Feeling Max's absence more than I could explain. Was he pacing at the door? Was he whining by the window? Was he waiting for me to come back like I always did? That thought cracked something in me. I leaned my head against the wall and closed my eyes. I couldn't cry, couldn't think, couldn't even be angry yet. I was nothing, a ghost in my own story. Hours passed, maybe more. No one came. No one told me what would happen next. No lawyer, no phone call, just silence. I studied the red lines on my wrists where the cuffs had been. My palms were still trembling. My breathing came in shallow, quiet waves. I tried to think logically. What could they possibly have on me? There was no reason, no evidence except that one plastic bag in my drawer that I hadn't put there. Then I remembered something. A flash important at first, then suddenly, everything. The bear. The stupid stuffed bear. It sat on my bookshelf, a gift from Grandpa Edward last Christmas. It had a floppy red bow and one eye that was slightly off-center, because that eye was a camera. A few months ago, Max had started having small seizures, nothing too serious, but I worried. I ordered a cheap nanny cam online, disguised as a toy, motion activated, recorded locally to a micro SD card. I tucked it inside the bear and placed it on the bookshelf. It faced the room, it faced the dresser. If Vanessa had walked in, if she had placed something in my drawer, the camera would have seen it. My pulse spiked, my fingers clenched, my mind snapped back into motion. I needed to get that footage. I needed someone who could find it before they did. Because if my parents, or worse, Vanessa, realized it existed, they'd destroy it, and it would be over. A guard walked past my cell. I stood. "Can I make my phone call now?" I asked, voice dry. He glanced at a clipboard, then unlocked the gate. They brought me to a tiny room with a phone mounted to the wall. A single sheet of paper lay on the desk beside it, a pen attached by a chain. I dialed the only person I could trust. Ashley picked up on the second ring. "Ratch, are you okay? Where are you?" I heard. "No time," I said, choking on my breath. "You need to go to my house, now. There's a teddy bear on my bookshelf. Red bow, left eye inside is a camera." "A what?" "It records to a memory card. It's If Vanessa went into my room, it would have caught her. You have to get it before anyone else does." Okay. I'm going right now. Take Max, don't let them keep him, I promise." "Ash," I paused, voice cracking. "Don't let them win." She was already moving. "They won't, I swear." I hung up, and for the first time since the cuffs clicked shut, I felt something break through the numbness. Hope. They brought me into a different room that afternoon. Not a cell, but not a place meant for comfort either. A metal table, 2 chairs, cinder block walls. The kind of place designed to remind you that you don't belong. I sat, staring at the scratches carved into the tabletop by people who came before me. Dates, initials, a lightning bolt. Every mark told a story no one bothered to hear. The door opened. She walked in, holding a legal pad and a plain black folder. Blazer too big, no makeup, no smile, just focus. Emily Grant. She looked young, early 30s, maybe, but with the eyes of someone who had seen too much and stopped pretending to be surprised by anything. She sat across from me, didn't introduce herself, just flipped open the folder and said, "Rachel Miller, charged with possession, with intent to distribute." Her tone was calm, efficient, like she was reading a weather report. I didn't answer, didn't even blink. She glanced up. "I spoke with your parents. That got my attention." "What did they say?" I asked, carefully. "They expressed concern," she said, scribbling something I couldn't read. "They said this behavior is out of character, but that you've been withdrawn, distant, possibly unstable." I laughed under my breath. Of course they did. Emily looked at me for a long second, then closed the folder. "Have you been feeling isolated lately?" she asked. I gave her nothing, Rachel, she said, more softly this time. "If there's something you're not telling me, now's the time." I leaned back, arms crossed. "What I'm not telling you is that my sister planted the drugs and my parents are covering for her." Silence. She didn't react with shock or disbelief, just waited. "You're saying," she finally said, "that Vanessa Miller, your sister, intentionally placed narcotics in your dresser and then reported it to the police?" I nodded. "And your parents supported the lie?" Another nod. Emily tapped her pen. "Do you have any proof of that?" I hesitated. Telling her was a gamble. If she told them, the evidence could disappear. But if I stayed silent, I had nothing, so I took the risk. "There's a camera," I said quietly, "in my room, hidden inside a teddy bear on my bookshelf." Her eyebrow lifted slightly. "A camera, motion activated, records to a micro SD card. It faces the whole room, including the dresser." She scribbled something, then looked back at me. "Does anyone else know it's there?" "Only one person. My best friend, Ashley." "Does she know where to find it?" "She's probably already there." Emily's expression changed subtly, but I noticed that was the moment she started to believe me. Ashley was parked 2 blocks from my house, heart racing. She wore a baseball cap pulled low and walked max fast down the sidewalk, trying to look casual. The house was quiet when she arrived. No police, no parents. Good, she slipped in with the spare key I once gave her back in high school, just in case. Max bolted in and ran to my room immediately, tail wagging, confused but loyal. Ashley moved fast. She spotted the teddy bear right away. Her fingers trembled as she unzipped the back, feeling around for the memory card. There it was, tiny, black, and everything. She slipped it into a portable case, shoved the bear into her tote, and grabbed Max's leash again. She was about to leave when she paused, looked around the room one last time. The chaos hadn't reached here yet. It was still mine, and she was going to make sure I got it back. Back in the interview room, Emily stood. "I'll contact your friend. We'll verify the footage as soon as possible," she said. "If it shows what you claim, everything changes." I exhaled for the first time in days. "Don't tell my parents yet," I said quickly.
"Or Vanessa." "I won't."
She slid her folder into her bag and paused before leaving. "You're lucky," she added, almost as an afterthought. "Why?" "Because most people in your situation, they don't have a camera, or a friend who believes them enough to go looking." As the door closed behind her, I leaned back in the chair, alone, still accused, still locked up, but something had shifted. For the first time since the knock at the door, I had something they didn't see coming: proof. They called it a pre-trial conference, but it wasn't that. It was a trap. They brought us into a windowless conference room at the courthouse. Fluorescent lighting buzzed overhead. The walls were a dull beige, as if they'd seen so many lies that color had stopped mattering. Emily and I arrived first. She set her laptop on the table and said nothing. I sat beside her, arms crossed, back straight. I didn't know how to prepare for a moment like this. To sit across from the people who betrayed you. To watch them watch the truth they swore didn't exist. The door opened. My mother entered first. Blouse neatly ironed, pearl earrings, lips pressed in her trademark "I'm still in control" line. My father followed, stiffer than usual, holding a manila folder he clearly didn't need. Then Vanessa, she looked smaller in this light. Hoodie pulled over her hands, hair in a messy bun, face pale but unreadable. They sat across from us in silence. Emily clicked open her laptop, adjusted the screen so it faced them, and said, "Before we begin, I'd like to share a short piece of video evidence relevant to the timeline in question." My heart beat so loudly I could hear it in my ears. She pressed play. It was grainy, muted colors. No sound, but clear enough. Vanessa walked into my room. She paused at the doorway, looked around, then walked calmly to my dresser. She pulled a plastic bag from her sleeve, opened the bottom drawer, slipped the bag inside. No hesitation, no confusion. Then she turned and walked out. The time stamp burned into the corner, one day before the police arrived. The room didn't erupt. There were no screams or gasps or chairs flying across the table. There was just silence. My mother's face went sheet white. She stared at the screen like it had betrayed her. Her lips parted slightly. Her eyes flicked to Vanessa, then away. My father shifted forward in his seat, elbows on knees, eyes locked on the screen like he was willing it to change. She stared at herself, planting the lie. Then, softly, without looking up, she said, "It wasn't supposed to go this far." Emily turned the laptop back toward herself and closed it with quiet finality. "Would you like to revise your statements?" she asked calmly. The pause was long. My mother spoke first. Her voice was paper thin. We were trying to protect the family. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was scripted. Vanessa's head snapped toward me. "You always made me the villain," she spat. "You walked around like you were perfect, like you were better than us." "I didn't have to pretend," I said. Her face twisted. "You don't get it. You always acted like a victim, even before anything happened. You made everything harder. You planted drugs in my drawer," I replied. Emily leaned slightly toward her. "You're aware this confession is being documented." Vanessa fell silent again. My dad finally opened his mouth, barely above a whisper. "This isn't helping." Helping who? Them, their image, their delusion. Emily stood, slipping the laptop back into her case. "The footage will be submitted to the prosecutor today. We'll also be requesting full dismissal of charges and opening a formal investigation into the false testimony submitted." My mother's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. My father didn't move. Vanessa stared at the table like it might swallow her. I said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Outside the courthouse, I sat on the steps with Max curled at my feet. Ashley handed me a coffee she'd brought without asking. She didn't speak either. Sometimes the loudest justice is silence. I looked up at the sky. It was clear, calm, unbothered by what just happened. They thought I would fall, but I had the one thing they never counted on: the truth, and a camera that never blinked. Excelente vamos expander. O capitulo u, revelando o verdadero motivo por trx da tracao, a haranca de Edward. Not to them. After the meeting at the courthouse, Emily drove me to Grandpa Edward's yellow house on Elm Street. It had chipped paint, creaky steps, and a porch swing that sang in the wind. but it was the only place in the world that didn't feel contaminated. Ashley brought Max the next morning. The second he saw me, he whimpered, tail wagging violently, like I'd been gone for years instead of days. He jumped into my lap, curled up tightly, and refused to move for the next 2 hours. He didn't need an explanation. He just needed me. Grandpa made grilled cheese for lunch, same as always. Cheddar, too much butter, burnt at the edges. I sat across from him at the tiny wooden table, watching the steam rise from our mugs of tea. He didn't ask what happened. Didn't say, "I told you so." Didn't lecture me about family. He just pushed the sugar bowl closer to me and said, "2 spoons, right?" I nodded. We ate in silence for a while, the kind of silence that holds space instead of suffocating you. Then, softly, he said, "I told them you know, about the inheritance. I looked up you what? Your parents, Vanessa. A few weeks ago, I figured if they were going to find out eventually, they should hear it from me." I blinked. "You told them you were leaving everything to me." He nodded like it was nothing. "The house, the land in Vermont, what's left of the retirement account. I've already signed the papers. It's all in a trust now, irrevocable." He stood, walked slowly to the living room cabinet, and returned with a thick, sealed envelope. He slid it across the table. "It's yours. They can't touch it, no matter what happens next." My hands trembled as I picked it up. "But why me?" I asked, voice small. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Because you're the only one who shows up when there's nothing in it for you." He smiled, the kind of smile that tugs at the corners of your eyes. "You visit because you want to. You remember my birthday, and you sit with me even when I don't talk." He sipped his tea. "I've watched you grow up in a house where no one saw you, and you still became someone who sees others. That's rare, Rachel, and it's mine to honor." I swallowed hard, unsure what to say. No one had ever said those words to me. Not like that. Not without strings. "They tried to erase me," I whispered. "They almost did." He reached across the table and placed his hand gently over mine. "They tried to erase your place in their version of the story, but they didn't write the ending." That night, I sat on the porch with Max curled under my feet and the folder resting on my lap. The stars blinked slowly above me. The air smelled like honeysuckle and wood. For the first time in years, I felt like I was where I was meant to be. Not tolerated. Not tolerated. Chosen. The courthouse smelled like old carpet and cold air. I sat in the back row of the courtroom beside Grandpa Edward, Max resting quietly under my seat, chin on his paws. My hands were clasped in my lap, but they weren't shaking anymore. This time, I wasn't the one on trial. Vanessa sat at the defense table in a borrowed gray blazer. She looked smaller than I remembered her, or maybe just human for the first time. Her confidence had evaporated. Her mouth was tight. Her eyes avoided mine. My parents were 2 rows behind her. My mother wore the same pearls she used to wear to school award ceremonies, only now they looked like a costume. My father gripped a legal pad like it would keep him from floating away. They didn't look at me. They couldn't. The judge entered, and we stood. The room quieted. The prosecutor stood first. "Your Honor, the state has accepted a plea agreement from the defendant, Vanessa Miller, for the charges of possession with intent to distribute and conspiracy to falsely report a crime." There it was, plea deal. 3 years in state prison, eligible for parole in 2. The prosecutor continued. The defendant admitted under oath that she planted the substance in her sister's room, coordinated with her parents to give false statements, and intended only to scare her sister, not anticipating the consequences. A low murmur passed through the room. Vanessa didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She looked tired, drained, like someone who had finally seen their reflection and didn't recognize it. The judge addressed her directly. "Do you understand the terms of this plea, Miss Miller?" Vanessa nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you wish to make a statement before sentencing?" There was a pause. Then she turned slightly in her seat, finally glancing back toward me. Her voice shook as she said, "I didn't mean for it to go that far. I thought she'd bounce back like always. I didn't think they'd arrest her." She paused. I was angry and afraid of losing everything. That was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get, and I didn't need it. Next came my parents. The courtroom held its breath. Their charges: obstruction of justice, false reporting, and conspiracy to commit perjury. 18 months each in county jail, followed by 2 years of probation and mandatory community service. My mother gasped just slightly as the sentence was read, not out of shock, out of embarrassment. My father didn't say a word. The judge addressed them both. "You prioritized appearance over truth, legacy over justice. You weaponized your silence and taught your children that protection comes with conditions." He banged the gavel once. Next case. Outside, the sky was blue, painfully so. I walked down the courthouse steps, Max keeping pace beside me, Ashley waiting near the curb with 2 coffees in hand. She handed one to me without a word. I took a sip, nodded once, and said, "It's done." She smiled softly. "It's just beginning." That night, I lay in bed at Grandpa's house, staring at the ceiling. I thought I'd feel victorious. Instead, I just felt free. They lost everything trying to bury me, and all I did was stand still long enough for the truth to surface. The week after the sentencing was quieter than any week I'd had in years. Not quiet like loneliness, quiet like recovery. The kind of quiet that fills a house instead of haunting it. Grandpa Edward's house was old, but it didn't creak under the weight of shame. It breathed. I spent my mornings fixing things. A leaky faucet, the cracked paint on the back porch, a broken hinge in the linen closet. And I spent my evenings on the swing, watching the sun bleed through the trees while Max dozed beside me. He still followed me from room to room, still curled around my feet like I might vanish again. One afternoon, a plain white envelope arrived in the mailbox. No return address, just my name, my full name. In neat, careful handwriting I knew too well. Vanessa. I stood in the hallway holding it for a long time, the paper soft from humidity. My fingers wanted to open it. My stomach did not. I walked to the bedroom, opened the bottom drawer of the nightstand, and placed it there unopened. Next to it were a few old-school photos, a watch Grandpa gave me when I turned 15, and a slip of paper that simply said, "You are not invisible." I didn't need to read her words. I already knew what they'd say. My parents didn't write. Not even through their lawyer. But one morning, Emily forwarded me a scanned notice from their estate attorney about reconsideration of assets. I sent back a single reply. There's nothing left to claim. Some nights, I still woke up sweating, heart pounding, breath caught in my throat, as if the knock was happening all over again. But now I had a place to land. A place that smelled like wood and tea and lemon cleaner. A place where someone asked, 2 spoons, right, and meant it. That spring, I enrolled in community college. Criminal justice. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do exactly. Maybe advocacy? Maybe investigation? All I knew was I wanted to understand the system that nearly erased me. Not to destroy it, but to navigate it. To help the ones who didn't have a teddy bear with a camera or a friend like Ashley to make that call. Max aged fast after everything. His steps were slower, his naps longer. Sometimes he watched me from the hallway like he was memorizing me, like he knew his mission was nearly done, and I loved him for it. Every time I scratched behind his ears, I whispered, "You kept me alive, little guy." And he thumped his tail like he already knew. I didn't open Vanessa's letter, not because I couldn't forgive her, but because I didn't owe her my healing. Forgiveness isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's just letting go without reopening the wound. And I was finally ready to let go. 6 months after the sentencing, Grandpa's house didn't feel like a refuge anymore. It felt like home. The chipped yellow walls had been repainted in soft sage green. The hallway was lined with thrifted picture frames, photos of Max, Grandpa, Ashley, and even me, smiling with a coffee cup, paint-stained hands, and a peace I didn't know I was capable of. The guest room had become my office. The attic was clean. The house, once filled with quiet ghosts, now held laughter, sometimes mine, sometimes Ashley's, sometimes Max's bark echoing through the hall like punctuation. One Saturday morning, while organizing some storage boxes, I found the letter again. Vanessa's, still sealed, still smooth, still heavy in its own quiet way. I sat down on the edge of the bed and turned it over in my hands. Not out of curiosity, just acknowledgement. I didn't open it. I didn't tear it up. I simply walked over to the desk drawer and placed it back beside my journal and a folded list titled, "Things That Tried to Break Me, But Didn't." Forgiveness wasn't something I wore on my sleeve. It wasn't a performance. It didn't mean pretending nothing happened. It meant drawing a line and never stepping back over it. Sometimes healing doesn't look like reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like silence, boundaries, peace, and I had all three now. Grandpa and I still had grilled cheese every Thursday. Same burnt edges, same jazz on the radio, same old man who looked me in the eye and never asked me to be smaller than I was. He never told me to move on. He never said family is everything. He just refilled my tea and said, "I'm proud of you, kid." Max moved slower now. He limped a little on cold mornings. He needed help climbing onto the couch. But he still followed me from room to room, still curled into the corner of my blanket like a comma, not a period, still looked at me like I was his whole world. And I guess I was. One day, while I was watering the front porch plants, a neighbor walked by with her dog and smiled. "You're Rachel, right? The girl from the news." I paused for a second, then smiled back and said, "No, I'm Rachel, the girl who stayed." People ask me sometimes if I'll ever speak to my family again. The honest answer, I don't need to, because I have everything they tried to steal: my name, my future, my voice, and I'm finally using it for something good. I study part-time. I work in the campus library. I volunteer with legal aid on Fridays. Some nights, I dream about starting a nonprofit. Other nights, I just dream about planting more basil in the garden. Both feel equally right, because I'm not chasing anything anymore. I'm building. Max still watches me carefully, even when I'm doing nothing. And every time he sighs and settles at my feet, I remember, not all love needs to be loud. Some love just stays. If you're listening to this, if you've ever been the one they blamed, ignored, erased, you're not alone. And you don't have to disappear to be free. You just have to believe that you're worth staying for. I'm Rachel Miller. I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere.